So again, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. So my project is called Héroes y Mujeres, Spanish-speaking mental health providers in San Antonio, Texas. Basically, what this project is about is pretty much explaining and demonstrating how your profession as women that speak Spanish in the mental health industry, basically, connect to your community and a bigger social issue and implication for the Latinx community. Basically, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, and like I said, you guys just answer it however you feel, you have to. So, first question, please share your name and professional current credentials and your educational background. And whoever wants to start first, go ahead.
My name is Allison Atkinson. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I got my undergraduate at Baylor University, and I got my master's in counseling at St. Mary's here in San Antonio.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Rocio Portales Guerrero. I am a licensed professional counselor too, and I got both my master's and my bachelor's upside down in Our Lady of Lake University.
Hey everyone, so my name is Blanca Vela. I am a licensed professional counselor supervisor and also bachelor's degree and master's degree from Our Lady of Lake University.
Awesome, thank you for that. Next question. If you guys are okay with it, would you guys be willing to discuss your heritage, identity, ethnicity? For example, are you Mexican American, Latinx, Chicano? Like that?
Sure, I'm Mexican American. I'm a first generation college student. So no one in my family had experience in college before me. So it started from my heritage. Like my dad was a Hispanic farm worker when he was 2 years old picking fruit. So from that to college, here I am.
I also identify as Mexican American, also first generation in the United States, and then first generation college student. Yeah, my parents have been, or at least, yeah, till now, they have always been such a great support system and always kind of pushed for me to move forward as much as I can.
My turn, sorry. So also first generation college student and first generation American citizen, and I also identify Mexican American and then also Chicana, of Chicana descent.
Awesome. All right. How does your culture identity inform your approach to working with the population you serve?
I personally understand first like the resistance or the just with the I don't know, God, the word's escaping me right now, but just like the lack of mental health services in the culture or the lack of like knowledge. It immediately goes like, if you need mental health, you must be crazy. There's no in between. So I think one, growing up from that, knowing like the culture is, if they're very hesitant to first go see a doctor in the first place for a physical ailment, mental health is like, a very far-fetched idea in our culture. So I just think having an open mind and knowing like there will be some resistance at first.
Definitely to piggyback on her, it's a lot of resistance, a lot of stigma that is put on to people that go into therapy. And when it's when someone of Mexican or Mexican American descent go into therapy, at least in my situation, I've seen that it's usually a woman. And if it's a man visiting, then it's because his wife is literally pushing him in, or because he has no other choice. And it's usually, pues mi esposa me hizo que viniera. It's a lot of understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I can piggyback on that. So yeah, unless they're in couple session, right, it's really difficult for a Hispanic man uh, to want to seek services, or unless they're kind of at that last case scenario, right? Like in
No
order to
tengo
keep
de
my
otra.
family, no tengo de otra, or I'm gonna lose my family. Like this is the last, like I have to do this, even though maybe the family's been asking for many years. And also that cultural identity of like machismo, right? Like, and also not wanting to share your problems with other people, right? Like,
Right.
¿qué le importa? Like, you don't want to share your problems with strangers. And so, definitely that resistance,
Right.
it's huge in our community. And unfortunately, we don't get those patients. I think even Allison, um, where you work at right now in a crisis situation, we get them once they're in crisis, right? Or like,
Mhm.
I guess that's your experience. It's like once they absolutely need to, that's when they'll get the services.
And usually, at least what I've seen, I don't know about y'all, but usually if it's a man visiting a male Hispanic or Mexican American, they're usually the ones that drop out pretty quick. Women are the ones that are more willing to stick it out and see how it goes and eventually actually like it.
Yeah. I do want to share though, I do see like a generational shift, like in private practice. It's like the younger generation is more open-minded, just like, yes, there's hope for the culture, but so that's kind of nice to see.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to the values, right? That we are sharing. And so maybe like older generations are coming and then they are encouraging like their children and their grandchildren, right, to seek services. And so it's not all of a sudden, oh, tienes que estar loca, right, para
Right.
buscar servicios. Or, men seek services to children, whatever. Or it's not that you're in doomsday and now we have to seek these services. So
Right.
I think it's just difficult, right? Even getting him into the door. And then I think Rocio, you mentioned also keeping them in therapy, in treatment. That's very difficult as well.
Right.
They drop out very easily, or they're like, no, no es para mí, o no me entiende, right? ¿Qué vas a ver? Especially women, right? Hispanic women
Right.
and the young Hispanic women, right? Like our age.
Yes.
And I've heard that before. ¿Tú qué sabes?
Yes.
Right?
No me
Like,
entiendes.
¿qué has vivido? Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I've also noticed that the younger generation tends to not tell the older generation that they're seeking services. So it's more of a hush hush.
Yeah.
My parents, my in-laws, nobody knows because I don't want them to judge me.
So how do you guys feel about when you hear like you said, an older generation saying like, oh, I don't need therapy, I can handle it by myself, or whatnot. How does that make you guys feel like as a therapist?
I don't think necessarily makes me feel one way or the other. It's more like of an understanding point. Like when someone comes with that mindset, I want to understand more of why they have that mindset. And for a lot, it's like, look at the time frame they grew up in, look at all they knew. I think my grandfather, he served in like the Korean War. And so he was just like, you know what, you push through, you deal with it. What good is talking about my problems going to solve? And that was his coping mechanism that got him through, and it took a generation. To my father, who was, he was in the military and he had PTSD and he needed a counselor. And that's when his eyes opened up to like, we can talk about this, And so I just think a lot of it has to come with the way you were raised and the era you were raised in. And it was, if it's a stigma now, it was even like tenfold prior. So I just think like everything is on a journey. So it's more for me an understanding mechanism. Like I might not win that discussion with the older generation. It doesn't mean I can't support them in a different way.
Gotcha.
Allison, I want to piggyback real quick off of that because I come from a family of attorneys, right? And so for me, it was like you're either an attorney or you
Not
can
on
do
us.
something different. But my family still has this connotation of like, so like I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a psicóloga, soy una psicóloga, right? And so there's still that negative connotation of like, oh, you help crazy people, right? Or you'll hear, can you
Yeah.
help her? She's crazy. And I'm like, oh, I could most definitely help her, but that doesn't mean she's crazy. Or I'll have a conversation with her. But again, that stigma, like you said, even in your families, knowing that like this is your career. And I think people even still kind of they make fun of it, right? So it's like, oh, te ayudas a los locos. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I mean, I think my work is pretty significant, right? And you don't have to be
Right.
crazy for us to
Sure.
have this conversation, but especially in the Hispanic community, it's still kind of ridiculed. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
For sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have an aunt who I'm pretty sure she knows the exact title, but she calls me a loquera. And I'm like, ooh, ooh, that burns. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just having to understand that not everybody's going to understand or want to know what is really going to therapy. And sometimes it's better off for you to understand rather than try to lecture and teach and teach, yes, but lecture and trying to change their mind right away, because that sometimes there's like a little bit of a roadblock with them.
I think even like the effort, and I don't know with you guys, I think we've been practicing for maybe a similar amount of time, but the effort that goes into it, I feel like with my Hispanic community, with my Hispanic clients, I have to maybe even prove why it's important for them to be there, even though it's
Right,
very obvious, right? That they
right,
not need to be there, but that they could benefit from the services and the treatment.
right.
But like the effort that I have to kind of, like you said, just to
Hmm.
retain them, and then
Right,
like, okay, like when am I going to see you back? Or the late cancellations or the recurring no shows, and it's kind of like I
right,
really like I see you. I know you could benefit from this.
right,
Let's get you an appointment. Let's get you scheduled. So I don't see that necessarily with my Caucasian, um, clients or other, other cultures. I do see that sometimes also with my African American culture as well, but definitely maybe 60% more in my Hispanic culture with my Hispanic clients.
right,
And it's kind of funny because it goes against what we're taught, right? Like you're not supposed to work harder than your clients. But with the culture, it might, they might need a little bit more encouragement at times. And so, yeah.
sometimes I feel like it's almost like a challenge, right? I don't want to be here, but my wife is making me do this, and what I'm doing is working. And it's more of like, okay, well, tell me what's been working, and then why does your wife think you need to be here, or why does your whoever referred you tell you to be here? So it's a matter of kind of like turning around the story and saying, okay, well, tell me more about it, and maybe if you don't need to be here, let's talk about it this first session.
It's almost like that check mark, right? Like
Yeah,
my wife wanted me to come, I came,
yeah,
and we're done. It's good. Our relationship is it's
yeah.
great. I'm
Fix her through
better. I'm
me.
saved.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question. How many years of experience do you have in the psychotherapeutic field, psychiatric therapeutic field?
I have 12 years. 12 years when I started as an intern to now.
I lost count.
We're
12, Blanca?
old. Yeah, actually
Yeah,
12, right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Something like
12
that. We
years.
graduated in 12. So
Yeah,
yeah.
12.
24. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we've all been practicing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The same amount of time. No wonder.
No wonder we lost count.
I know, nobody lost count. We have the ganas to prove it. Yeah.
Yo me lo pinto.
What inspired you to become a mental health therapist?
Sorry. My first reaction, you just remind me like when we started our program, that's a question the professor asked, and we all thought we knew the right thing. Like, we want to help people and this, that, and the other. And he point blankly said, you're here because of your own trauma. And that hit. And I was like, you're not lying. Like, so I think for me personally, it was like a lack of resources. Like, I look back on my life and I'm like, man, if I would have had an opportunity to have a counselor, or if my family could have had a counselor, perhaps some things would be different. So that's what kind of like indirectly, I guess, pushed me into this field.
So I graduated high school not knowing what the hell therapy was, because again, first generation in the United States. But I knew that I wanted to help people. Like a friend of mine from middle school. This friend was very depressed to the point where he would cut, he had suicidal ideations. And one night, back then we were doing the chat rooms, and he said, I want to end it all. And it freaked me out, right? Because I was in middle school. I have no idea what that means, but obviously knew enough to know that he needs help. And so I at that point, it was more of the mindset of, I want to help people like this friend, because I don't want him to ever go through that again. So that's kind of like my story. He's good now, by the way.
Oh,
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
Allison, I don't think you made me think about that.
I made you what?
You made me think about how I went into this career field, right? Because I was like, the first thing I don't know, Rocio, if you remember, like we went to the same program, and it was like, if you're here to make money, you're in the wrong program, one. And if you're here to help people, I did hear that. If you're here to help people, good luck, right? That's not going to happen either. And it was like, oh, I kind of did want to make some money, but okay, I'm still going to continue. I went into law initially, and I wanted to be an attorney, eventually wanted to be a judge. I went into law, I guess, pretty blindly, and I hated it. I hated it. It is a shark field. I'm not a shark. I'm just not, and I really genuinely do want to help people. And I also had a similar experience with a friend with suicidality, and I had also no idea what that was, or how to help, or what a safety plan was, or what a support system was, or how, if they were going to kill themselves, and and how I could help. So similar experience, I guess, with both of you. But now that you said that, Allison, I'm like, oh, let's talk about my trauma, right? Because I don't know if people actually realize this, but therapists have therapists, or we should be encouraged to, right? Because we also need someone to talk to and debrief, and because we have problems too. And I think even when I share that with my clients, they're like, why? Right? Like, you should be perfect. Like, you should have no problems. That's why you're helping me. And that's not the case, right? We all have problems. And so, but Alice, I don't know, that triggered a thought for me. So I'll be pensive.
I think that's a disclosure I make in like all my initials. And in private practice is sharing like, hey, therapists have therapists, because we, and I've been asked why before, and I just kind of shares like, it's a way to maintain our own health. You would easily go get a 6 months checkup at the doctor, right? So checking in on your mental health, especially the majority of time we hold people's worst times, their traumas, we're holding not the best moments in people's lives. It's a lot to expect from someone just to be kind of robotic. And so I look at it as a way of like our own therapy is like, hey, this is the way I continue to help people by taking care of myself.
Cool. Next question. Can you speak to your own experience working with a Hispanic community within the mental health field?
I think we've kind of already covered that, Luis. But more than anything, I think like we talked about the resistance that we get and the whole coloca. So I think we're good with that one.
Well, do y'all think that you build a better rapport with your Hispanic clients? Because I feel like
you make a valid point, yeah.
Because like I feel like my Hispanic or my Mexican clients, right? My Spanish speakers, it's almost like you're coming in, and if you're, I don't know, sipping on your water, they're not going to care. If you're sipping on your coffee, mostly, sometimes they'll walk in with their own coffee and they'll just sit there, and it's almost very natural. But other cultures, it's more of like I have to be super professional and no drinking anything, don't choke, don't start coughing, because they look at you like, I don't know, that's my experience. But it's almost like your recording's gonna end soon. My rapport with my Mexican clients is so much different, and it's almost like you hug them, they request a hug. And it's very casual. It's not something like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. It's more of like, this is our culture and we're gonna do it.
You know what, Rosia, you mentioned that, and absolutely right, because it's like our ethics are sometimes blurred, right? And I find myself in that predicament, like if I have a client bring me coffee because they stopped at Starbucks to get themselves coffee, it's that we're not really supposed to accept gifts,
right?
But then it would be rude not to accept the coffee, right?
You do more harm by not accepting the gift.
Right.
Yeah, because then if they become offended, like, oh, like there's nothing wrong with the coffee. Not that there's anything wrong with the coffee.
Right.
Or I've had clients like invite me to their weddings or their quinceañeras, and I can't go, right? I have to respectfully decline. And the question is why? Why can't you go?
Right.
Nobody's gonna know that, right, who you are. And I'm like, but I know. And you know, so the ethics there are blurred, and that I'm glad you did bring that up, because that's such an important aspect as well. And I think being female also, right, of like, oh, I had a client call me comadre, and I was like, well, I'm not your comadre, right? Like, I'm not your friend, I'm your therapist, and we have a therapeutic rapport and relationship. And so, but again, I don't want to
right. I had a client who would call it, they would send me a message, comadre, I need a text, or I don't need, not a text, a session. And so I had to kind of let them know, hey, we're not friends, this is therapy. And I mean, eventually I just kind of let it happen, because comadre was their way of feeling more comfortable with it. But there was always that, okay, but yes, you can call me that, but I am your therapist, not your friend. So it was more of like a comfort thing, and there.
All right. Next question. As a Spanish speaking clinician, how does your bilingualism enhance your practice?
For someone like Princey to be able to I think it opens doors. I think when I first started, I first said, I'm not going to work with children. I'm not going to work with crisis. And lo and behold, I worked with children who are in crisis. And they were Spanish speaking, solely Spanish speaking. So that strengthened my skills real quick right off the bat. But I think the beautiful thing in that right away is for someone, it may like reduce their guard, like you speak, my native language, like I can begin to feel comfortable talking to you, right? And something that works for me with working with children who speak Spanish, I always say, like, I'm not a native speaker, so if I say something wrong, like, hey, please help me, please correct me, so when I speak with the next kiddo, I'll say it right. And that's just something I learned very early, to kind of decrease that power differential, and like allow them a space to contribute, because in that sense, like, they were the expert in the Spanish language.
I think for me, being bilingual, especially for the younger generations, it gives that ability to do like the switch back and forth, English to Spanish. Sometimes like there's some expressions that are very easily said in Spanish that can't be translated necessarily to English. And so giving the client and even myself that comfort of being able to switch and having each other understand is so much easier, and it makes things flow just so much better. That, I mean, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, 100%. Same as Allison and Rocio. And I think I've seen colleagues using like the translation services and just how horrible that is. And it's, you're hearing this and you're thinking this client has no idea what is going on, especially in crisis, right? Like you'll see parents, and the parents are trying to understand what the translator is saying. The therapist has no idea what the parent is. I mean, it's the doctor has no idea. It's a mess. And at the end of the day, it causes so much more confusion. But also the opportunity to help like a different population. And mind you, like I also understand the aspect of there's so many different types of Spanish, right? Different languages and different dialects, that it's not just one Spanish. And so that's difficult as, sometimes as well. But definitely just opened more doors, especially living in San Antonio, like South Texas, of this part, right? Not that it doesn't exist in other locations, but I feel like here is where I've gotten a little bit more of that experience.
As a Spanish speaking clinician, how does your, I already asked that one, sorry. In what way do you believe your identity as a Latino mental health therapist sets you apart within the mental health community?
I think like in accumulation of everything we've been talking about, it's just, if there's already a resistance off the bat or a hesitation to go to therapy, something that could open the door or make it a little less resistant is like someone who speaks a language, someone who's comfortable with it, someone, even as it was pointed out, like even if we flow back and forth between English and Spanish, I feel like it's just an extra benefit and to both therapist and client.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's just the ease and the comfortability.
Yeah.
The rapport.
Me too.
How do you feel that this community of mental health has grown throughout our city of San Antonio and/or South Texas? What are some of the most impactful culture intersections, correlations that you have encountered with our population?
I can start in regards to like when I was doing my graduate school practicums. I definitely saw a growth from then to now, right? So in the past 12 years, mental health has become more of a staple, at least in San Antonio. So like we have more resources, more there. And I don't know if it's maybe just me learning about them, but I just feel like the growth in San Antonio or in South Texas has become immense. Like more psychiatric hospitals have opened up. Just the amount of resources available has increased within the past 12 years that I've been a therapist. And then speaking to therapists or that have worked maybe 15 plus years, they've definitely seen the difference, right, of growth. And I think Allison had said like like that generational aspect of now how important mental health is. And even then, right, I think Allison and I have seen it in the hospital system of like mental health is like the last thing on the list. Everything else comes first. Even if the patient or the client is actively psychotic, we're like last on the list, and we're just really just isolated, right, from everybody else. And so we're still kind of like, I don't know if this is the correct name, like the stepchild, right? Like the black sheep of the family, to where it's like, oh, I guess we need them. So, but I still think there's been a growth from, from when I started.
I think we're in a perfect spot of like, we've seen a lot of growth, and yet at the same time we have so much far to go. Just evident is like all the tragedies we see in the world. 12 years ago, you didn't really hear about all like this naturally like provided trauma of like shootings in nightclubs, to shoot more shootings in schools, so more shooting. And so I don't really feel like mental health has ever been in the forefront as it is now. Because now you hear like, oh, mental health days, I'm taking a mental health day, and that tends to be with like the younger generation, right? Or I think of my son in elementary, and they're like cookies with counselors, and like all the kids want to go talk with a counselor. I'm like, where was that when I was growing up? So it's definitely been um a blessing to see like this field growing.
Basing it back on what Blanca was saying, I feel like the mental health therapist field has definitely grown in the last couple of years. And I feel like it keeps growing every year. But also, I feel like with the newer, I guess, younger generations, the stigma is slowly getting or decreasing. And so I guess the correlation is there, right? The more therapists there is, the more help that there is for especially the bilingual uh, Mexican American or even Latino community.
I want to put that out there, you guys, that this is a predominantly male dominated profession, right? And so us, one, being Latinas or Spanish speaking, two, being women, and three, going into this field. And now, and it may just be me, but I'm surrounded by Latina, Spanish speaking, strong therapist women. And so it's just amazing to see even just that, right? That we are growing as a community, especially particularly South Texas, but I've also seen them like in California and even like Seattle and New York, right? Like it's amazing that we're growing. It's great.
And I think it's great because when you think back to our master's programs, and like the fathers of psychology, they didn't want to hear women's perspectives. There was not a women that I learned a theory from until we got like I think like Adler's daughter or something. Like it was like later down the road, right? But everyone we learned about was a white Caucasian male who spoke to everyone's living experiences. And then, to get through your master's, write a paper and pick a theory. And it's like, wait, well, not everyone fits into this box.
Right.
So I think now it's like we have the opportunity that we're learning and we're growing and we're sharing it as a community of professionals to kind of be like almost like a beacon of light. Like, we don't have to fit into this cookie cutter, but here we are for not just like for our people, but for like all people, to show that it's okay if you don't fit into chapter 5 of this theories book.
Isn't
Isn't
it
it
amazing?
weird?
Oh, sorry. I was like, isn't it amazing? You're like, isn't it weird?
Basically the same concept, right? But isn't it weird the way that we're Latinas and Spanish speaking at that, and we had to learn about this field from Caucasian men who, at that point, it was just like there was no Latino anything, not even the clients that we were looking, that they were studying were Latino. And all of a sudden, like there's this change. I mean, Blanca, I don't know if you remember, but even when we had that, when we went to Mexico City for the exchange, like they were studying basically the same people we were in Mexico. So it was insane.
100%. And even thinking, gosh, psychosis, right? somebody can be spiritual and believe that, you know, the Virgencita is taking care of them and talking to them, or that their ancestors are talking to them. And how many, I'm like thinking, like, how many people got locked up in a psychiatric ward
Right, right.
how they were actively psychotic, or the medications that they were given. And I'm like, this is like a spiritual, you know, like, and being able to distinguish that, right? Obviously, like, is this spiritual? Is this cultural? Or
Right.
is this active psychosis, right? Like, it's this
Right.
schizophrenia, misdiagnosis, medications. I mean, and you know, back then, right? Like being put in a straitjacket, and just, you know, and this is why people didn't talk. They didn't want to share. And so, but now, like, you know, again, that growth of, I can tell somebody that I believe in the Virgin Mary and that she's talking to me, and being very cautious, of course, right? Because maybe it is psychosis, but I don't even think that's something you can learn, right? Like in graduate school, it's something that comes from our own personal um, Hispanic background, you know, and value
Right.
systems, and
Right.
that's,
Even talking about like limpias
Yeah,
with
I
your
was just thinking
clients.
that the tienes ojo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, when do you think that that would have even been in a book that we studied? Like, yet we have to, in a way, be more like sensitive to that and know that some people are going to believe in it, some people are not. And for some people, it works. I mean, of course, alongside with therapy, but some people do believe in the limpia, and you know what? Go for it. But also make sure that you're checking in with your mental health, because that's not everything. It's not going to fix everything.
you reminded me, I had a client who was devoted to La Santa Muerte, right? And so I feel, for me, it was like, okay, cool, right? Like, that's fine. It's a devotion and it's your religion and whatever. Somebody else, right? I'm thinking like a male, Caucasian male in the therapy field. I don't know how they would have, you know, received that, or made the patient or the client feel comfortable, or, you know, and even tattoos were such a taboo back then. And so now you can really, sometimes people, you can read them through their tattoos, or their choice of tattoos. And so, and this guy had La Santa Muerte tattooed on his arm, right? Like all down his arm. So again, for me, it was okay. It was cultural. It was his religion, no problem. But, and I was more curious to learn about it because I didn't know much about it. But but I could understand that cultural aspect, you know.
Right.
Um, what aspect of working with the Hispanic Latino community in San Antonio has been particularly rewarding to you?
I think a reward that I've seen is when, well, one is when they return, right? Like if there can be a second session, if it can move forward as far as like, working towards goals and making progress that way. But I think when they themselves acknowledge, their personal wins of like, you know what, this might have been done to me, but it doesn't mean like I have to continue a certain cycle of XYZ. And I think another goal would be like when they refer you or recommend someone to come see you, like it kind of just spreads in the community, that you offer a safe place, that you offer a place of inclusion, that you know, you offer this this service that can really just be to benefit them that some people have never heard of.
For me, it's seeing that hesitant client that shows up to the first session, telling me at the end, kind of like being able to breathe and saying, I feel lighter. Even after, you know, at least for me, I tell them the first session might not be so great, and just know that things might get harder before they get better. And not just that, but then seeing them continue in therapy, and not just you seeing a change or a difference, but them seeing it in themselves, and getting to the point eventually to where they openly talk about their therapy, and they openly talk about, you know, my name and my location, and sharing that information with their friends and peers because they now believe in it, and they know that that hesitation is gone, and they want to normalize it for whoever will listen.
Agreed. I you know everything that you ladies said, and then also for me, it's also particularly right because I came from such a psicoloca, right? Like foundation. For me, it's like breaking those barriers. And even if it's not for my family, right? Because I feel like even for my family, I've pushed and pushed and pushed therapy for so many family members and cousins, and they're like, absolutely not. I will never talk to a stranger about my problems. I will never, nobody needs to know about my marriage. Nobody needs to know about my children, you know? So, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my profession, right? Like you don't believe in what I do, right? Like, and that hurts a little bit, right? Because you know what I do, but you don't believe in it. Even like a spouse or something like that, where it's like, this is literally what, you know, how we live or what we live
Right.
off of, but you don't believe in my work. And there's that like maybe like internal conflict as well. But if I can do that for other families, then I guess that's where my reward comes in. And so and being able to see, because even if just I'm showing up, I think we have all had this in private, we all have private practices as well. And if the client shows a first time, that's a win, right? Like even just showing to the intake session, that's a win. And then it's kind of like but then that's where the effort comes in of like hooking it, right? This is why you're here. This is how I can help you. Let's talk about the expectations for me, for you. And what is this, right? Porque ni yo sabía, right? Like you said, I didn't know. I didn't have a counselor in school. Like I had home ec. They gave, oh, that's where I left off. They would give you a baby because that was the expectation of being a woman and like a Latina woman of like, you need to learn how to take care of these children, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll take care of a baby, but that's not the only thing in life that I'm gonna do. And so even just breaking your own your own family expectations of what you're supposed to be, or those that Hispanic expectation of like ser ama de casa, right? Cuidar a los niños, tener la comida lista, el esposo trabaja, or even just getting married, right? And like that's an expectation too. And I'm like, oh, you don't have to get married. You don't have to have children. You could be a strong, independent woman and, have a
Right.
career, do whatever you want to do. So looking back on all of those cultural limitations and breaking those barriers and those ceilings, being Latina women, in this field particularly that's dominated by men, and then even seeing our own community here in San Antonio. Allison, we didn't go to school together, but knowing that we have this connection, right? It's so powerful. For me at least, it's so powerful. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
I think even maybe I know that I'm not going to change my aunts, my parents' idea of therapy, but now seeing it in the perspective of my daughter, right? Like I was telling you about how our girls were getting along the other day, and it was like them being able to say, I guess not vocalizing it, but saying, I need time. And one thing that I've noticed in my daughter, it's like she is kind of like the middle person in a good way. She'll tell her friends, no, you're being wrong. You need to be nice, or you need to be, and she's in first grade. So telling her friend, maybe you should apologize because you did wrong. And being able to communicate that, that's a barrier that I am so glad that I'm breaking, because I don't remember doing that in first grade or anything. So, I mean, that's my reward.
I absolutely. And in that regard, having a voice, right? And so telling our children, like, this is your voice, this is how you advocate for yourself. This is what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. This, and all of and again, just giving them that voice. And Rocio, you said it the other day. She sent me a message and she said, this is how our daughters are true, or they're children of therapists, right?
Right.
Because of the vocabulary that they use and because of how they express themselves and how they advocate for
Right.
others. And I never really realized that. But even like their teachers have come to me and said their vocabulary is so different. And
Yeah.
it's because they hear us, right? They
Right.
listen to the way that we talk and we articulate. And so, but it's so interesting. And Allison, I don't know if you've encountered that
Mm.
with
Oh, sure. And I think it goes back to like the, again, like our own generational shift, right? So like we have a calm corner. So whenever we feel like really big emotions, there's like no timer out, there's nothing negative, no punishment. It's like, hey, I want to go to my calm corner. I want to go with my stuffies. I want to go with my favorite books. And I'm just taking a minute to like reset. Then I'll get like, okay, can we talk about it now? Or I love the fact you mentioned voice, because that's something we say is like, you do have a voice. You can advocate, and exactly what I don't ever remember someone telling me when I was 8, like, hey, your words matter. Like, you sure advocate for yourself.
Right.
Um, and I think something that's really big with my son too is like boundaries. Like growing up, it was like we're going to your Theo and Thea's house. You go in, you give everyone a hug and a kiss, and then you go sit down. And my son's gonna say hello if he wants to say hello. Like he's not gonna be forced
Right.
to engage in that. So again, like this whole like generational shift of children who have a voice, who can, and be specific and voice their boundaries, I think is huge, right? And learning coping, healthy coping at a very young age is
Right.
the top thing for us, I guess.
Allison, and I still catch myself doing that, right? So even like breaking what you've learned and because even
Mhm.
like I'll go in and I'm like, oh, like say hi to Thea, like give her a hug.
Yeah.
And then I catch myself and I'm like, oh, or and I've done this, before. And the Thea's like, you don't have to like that's okay, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thea is a therapist as well. And I'm like, oh, you're right, that is okay. But we have these also strong values, right, within our Hispanic culture of like how disrespectful it is for you to go in and not say hello or not hug.
Mhm.
So
Right.
it's also that struggle of like me as a therapist, but me as a Latina and like that disrespect and how rude.
Uh-huh.
And so, but I still struggle and I catch myself and I'm like, oh, you don't have to hug, but it's like after the fact, right? Or if
But
somebody says it. And so, but again, then they're gonna take that with their if they want to have to whatever, right? Like with their
yeah,
family and just kind of it's just gonna, I think, hopefully improve as we
Yeah.
go through. But it's so interesting you guys said that. We also have a calm partner.
yeah, nice.
Cool. One last question. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you offer an aspiring mental health therapist who wishes to work with the Hispanic Latino communities in San Antonio?
To watch this video. No, I think it's just, it's all encompassing. I feel like, oh man, that's a really loaded question. It's like kind of thinking back, like what would I would want to learn to know from the very beginning. Um, gosh, I don't know if there's like a right answer for me in this, but I would go more with like finding that balance, like what we're just talking right now, like to be the professional, but to also not lose your identity, right? Because you just had one way of learning this. I would go with starting off in this profession, make sure you start your own therapy. It's just kind of key, just to staying healthy and surviving in this and then thriving in this, right? And so I wish I would have started that way, like an internal check-in myself, and then I don't know, I think that really could have benefited from the beginning, right? Of understanding like why am I really here? And like dissecting that trauma before I'm like semesters into this. So
I think for me, building a good community with a therapist for yourself, right? Like therapists, friends, because it is such a big community, but yet it can also be very lonely if you don't take care of that and have the correct people. Because especially going into private practice, I mean, you don't have really colleagues unless you're building a group practice. And even then, it's so competitive that you almost have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, but also having someone to be able to check in, not necessarily about clients or anything, but it's checking in like, hey, I have a mental block, or, I send Blanca memes about notes every so often. And it's just having that, right? That friendship, that group that will tell you, hey, let's do this, let's get together, let's do notes, let's do whatever it is, whatever you need, because again, it's lonely if you don't have the correct people.
Oh, that's so true. And I think even like graduating, we had a pretty big cohort, and I
Yeah.
speak with maybe 2 therapists from my
Stick
entire
to one.
cohort. Is it me?
I wonder.
But it's legit. Like, and even though you graduate from, this is your cohort, I think even just that trust, right? That even, they have the best benefit in mind for you. Um, I hate to say malice exists, right? I mean, it does.
Right,
And
right.
you mentioned like that competition, right, aspect of it. For me, I'm like free for all, right? If you have a cool, like I'm so excited and happy for you. Like I'm always excited for people's growth, but not everybody's excited for your growth. So anyways, for me, what would I say to mental health therapists, right? Aspiring mental health therapists is just, again, like kind of going back to what Allison, like, to make sure that this is for you, and that you are taking care of your own mental health. Because if you go in not really knowing what that looks like, right, it could, I mean, and I've seen it go bad, right? I've seen people who go into this profession who just, they somehow lose themselves somewhere in this, because it's a lot. You carry everybody, every single client from years ago. I still remember their story, and I still remember their trauma, and you carry it with you, right? And being able to really separate yourself from that, but still, we're on call 24/7. Like, I don't care if you're not technically on call. Like, if you have a private practice, or if you have a client maybe from a year ago, they can call you at 2, 3 in the morning and be like, hey, I need help. Right.
Right.
And then what are you going to do? You're not going to ignore the call. You're going to help, right? Even if you haven't talked to this client or their family, mind you. I've had families call me 2, 3 years later, and they're like, hey, Blanca, like, I need help. This is what's going on. I haven't seen them in years, but I can't ignore the call, right? And so, and I won't, if you're on vacation, or, whatever you're doing. And so this is really a profession that you dedicate your life to. And even that, knowing that your family understands that, right? Like, my kids know, hey, it's a client calling me. My husband knows, hey, I have a client that needs me. And it really is like even sometimes like an on-demand job, right? So,
Right.
and that's heavy.
Right. Even having to like warn I guess your immediate family now, right? Your husband, your kids. Okay, there's gonna be times when someone's going to need me, and it's 10 o'clock, and it's happened, right? 10 o'clock at night, and they're not sure if they need to go to the hospital, but they know that they feel comfortable calling you. And so I have had that happen, and the client's like, I'm sorry, I'm taking you away from your family. And I'm like, wait, first of all, this is a conversation that you have to have with not just the client, but with the family, and saying, this is important, y'all are important, but right now this person's mental health, their security is on the line. And so even reminding the client, like, my husband knows about it, they gave me the green light, they want me to be here for you, and don't worry about it. So yeah, also letting aspiring therapists know that this is a very rewarding job too, just like it's very on demand, but you won't become Dr. Phil.
I love
You're
it.
not
I
gonna
love it.
you're not gonna get your TV show.
Maybe Steve Wilkos. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe.
I've had it happen in my office.
For sure.
I'm sure everybody's been there. I've been attacked. I've been strangled. we're in a crisis, situation. Things have been thrown at me. People have thrown stuff at each other. I mean, it's also not like what people think. It's just like a nice, calm job, right? Like,
Right,
especially
right,
like where you
Or they
work.
just lie down on the couch, and it's like, no, it's not really
right,
like that.
right.
Yeah,
I do
moving
have clients that will
on.
lay down.
Yeah, me too. Take their shoes off and I'm cool with that. But
Yeah,
again, it's also like this taboo, this perception of like your job is so easy, and I'm like, oh, what's easy about it, right? Like I'm on
right,
call 24/7. I carry people's trauma, dealing with your own trauma, right? Taking care of your family or whatever it is that you're taking care of. It's a lot of work, and
right,
even now, like, and I really appreciate that we were all able to meet. With it's really late and we're all awake, but this is us. Like we're usually up
right,
doing notes, we're usually up working, or we work overnights, or like this is kind of what it is, like what being a therapist looks like. So it's just I don't know how long I can do this for, but a ver qué pasa, right?
right.
Awesome.
Also, you're not always going to save every couple. I think I've broken up more. I haven't done it, but there's been more breakups in my office, and there has been um, saved marriages sometimes. Unfortunately, by the time people come into therapy, especially couples, it's late, and they know it, but they want a miracle to happen.
100%. You can't, and the fact is that
Right,
you cannot help everyone, and that's a hard realization too. And so, I have had clients who have committed suicide, and it's always that concern of like, oh my God, right? Did I not do everything that I could have? Did I,
right,
like, and I've never had that. Like I've had families tell me like I know we know you did whatever you could. It was just maybe it was too late, or that person just didn't want help, right? Like they knew what they wanted. So anyways, we just can't help everyone,
right.
unfortunately.
Cool. Well, that's all I got for y'all. Thank you very much for your time. It's late. Uh, so I really appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys
Bye.
so much. We'll
Bye.
see you soon.
Yes,
Yeah,
bye.
thank
We'll get
y'all.
together and we'll write a book.
Yeah.
As we were talking
We
and
should
share our
all get
experiences.
together and write a book. There's an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, we'll get together, write a book, or do like a presentation, TCA, ACA, you
There you
know.
go.
That sounds really
I
good.
think I hit myself with like our book on theories. I was like, nobody in there looked like us, so maybe we should make our own book.
But I'm serious about this. Yeah, I'm 100% on there. And
Awesome.
we'll omit Mr.
Yeah.
Vela because we know.
I've even told Blanca, hey, let's start a podcast because people need to know the real and the dirty and the ugly and everything.
You know
So
what? That is a good idea. You guys should do a podcast.
Counselors on the couch.
there
There you
you go.
go.
Oh, I love
Like a
that.
Dr.
podcast
Seuss.
means you don't have to put on your makeup, right? You can just talk.
No, they record the podcast. Just bring
Oh,
the
Yeah.
cafecito on the couch.
Yeah.
that's not bad. We're growing ideas here. I'm totally down for it.
Pues
Héroes,
mándame un email.
what was the name? It was Héroes y Mujer, right? Héroe y Mujer. Like,
No, but Allison just said therapist on the couch. I like that.
Yeah.
ooh.
Uh-huh.
It's not a
You're
bad
We can
idea.
brainstorm later, but yeah, this is
Hey,
good.
hey, Mr. Cybersecurity, maybe you can help and put something. I zero technology anything here.
Yeah, like the Charlie's Angels of Counseling. That'll,
There you
you
go.
know.
That might work. You might be onto something.
There you go.
All
Started.
right, we'll figure
Okay.
something out, you guys.
I
Bye.
appreciate everybody's time. Thank y'all very much for doing this.
You're
Y'all have a good
welcome.
night.
We'll see
You
y'all.
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye.